Thanks, Andrew. That was an inspiring discussion. And I think we might actually lead off this next group with a little bit of a bridge and ask their views about esports as well. But our last panel today is certainly not the least in terms of significance, and the people that we have here are terrific. So trying to figure out why this thing is wobbling. Huh, okay. Andrew, fire away.
Let's bring them up. Come on, guys. I want to introduce our last panel, which is kind of our culminating panel for sports media and millennials. We've heard from the media personalities in the second panel. Now we'll hear from their bosses. And we'll hear how the executive, how the C-suite looks at these issues, which I think is fascinating. To my far left, Erika Nardini, Barstool Sports, CEO. When I said we had the CEO of Barstool, the reaction I got from our younger audience, wow, superstar, rock star right here. Welcome. Eric Johnson from ESPN, good friend of Jeff and myself. Work with him at ESPN, head of sales, overall guru, someone that's been very supportive of our program. Welcome, Eric. John Wertheim, who I work with as well at Sports Illustrated, executive editor, writer, does it all for Sports Illustrated, and obviously an author, published author. His books are my favorite. Happy to have John here. And David Bruce from Major League Soccer, who's in charge of their brand and their marketing. You'll enjoy, for the first time, we have a different accent on the panel. That'll be interesting. That's correct. So welcome our panel, please, with a round of applause. It's great to have them all here.
So I'm going to start off with a bit of a bridge question, as I promised here. The last panel focused on esports. What's esports? How does it relate to, all of us, our lives? Is it only for young people? How does it affect each of your businesses? Are you looking at esports? Is it something that touches your businesses? I'd be interested in each of your perspectives. Erika, fire away.
So we're experimenting a lot with coverage of esports as well as esports platforms. So I'll give you an example. Last night we had 2 bloggers playing each other on Twitch. And the loser had to get a tattoo, which he also did live on Twitch, which I'm not sure is exactly esports, but I think but esports is really disruptive. At Barstool, we like disruptive content and cover it in a disruptive way. And I think everything is a war for attention, and it is a sport that is capturing attention of a very elusive demo.
Eric?
Yes, we spend a lot of time thinking about esport, and I think in listening to the panel before, we're not quite there yet, but it's undeniable that it's coming. The audience, the way people are watching, consuming, feels very fandom-oriented, extremely fandom-oriented. And I think as a result of that, we currently have dedicated news and resource and reporters that are covering it. We've looked at different leagues. We do Heroes of the Door. We do some television. It's not a TV play, a linear TV play, in my mind, long term. But it is something that is going to be, advertisers are spending time thinking about it, learning about it, spending a little bit of money in it, but not quite ready to dive in fully. Yeah,
we're all learning.
We're all learning. And, look, our company has a relationship with BAMTech. BAMTech has a great relationship with Riot. Spent a lot of time with the League of Legends guys. I think that is something that's going to be a global phenomenon. I think it doesn't matter about borders. I think this will be the first kind of global sport that will start from inception as a global sport.
Interesting. John?
Yeah, I think that's really well put. On a smaller scale and without without the television component to think about, I would say guarded optimism. There are some things that certainly militate in favor of coverage. The numbers don't lie, the age, the fact that it's so global. I think there are other challenges. One of them, honestly, is just personnel. I mean, we've done the What Is This Sports story, and we've covered it periodically, and it plays well socially, but as of now, we just don't have someone who would cover this the way Peter King would cover the NFL. That's been a bit of a challenge, but I've been to a million meetings where it's been roped together with drone racing. I don't know if you've...
we have drone racing as well, but I consider them separate.
Exactly. I think we differentiate this. I think one thing that's been instructive to us, and I don't know if you as well, was about 10 years ago, I said, hey, there's this sport, it's mixed martial arts, there's this group, it's the UFC, it's kind of become the dominant league, and people said, oh, this thing will, this is the XFL part 2, and is this real or is this fixed, and do people really die? And it was sort of very quickly dismissed. And I think UFC's been something that's been really instructive, that someone dismissed it, and who would think that there'd be an audience for watching kids play League of Legends, and very quickly we see that in fact is very much the case.
Got it. David?
Yeah, we look at it as it's an incredibly fascinating thing that's going on at the moment. I don't think anyone has really truly figured it out. We look at it as a channel. I mean, we're very, very lucky because we're a soccer league and we have one of the most popular games on the planet, FIFA, being played all over the world by kids of all ages in every corner of the planet. So we're really buoyed by the opportunity. We see it as a way to talk to our fans through the game. And I'm a brand guy at the core. There is no place for me that you can be as intimate with our brands as in the FIFA video game. The lifelike quality of these games is quite insane. The way that they model players and they model stadiums. You can go in, if you're a casual MLS fan, you can understand the jerseys, you can understand the sponsors, you can understand the players, the formations, the team stadium, the chants that the fans actually have. So as a touch point into our world, it's incredibly, incredibly exciting. And when you think about the fan base in esports, the fan base we have in soccer, it's very, very young. It kind of mimics very, very closely what we have. So for us, it's finding the right way of activating esports, activating FIFA, so that we can bring people into the league in kind of very, very different ways. So I'll highlight a story that actually went live yesterday. NYCFC, one of our teams in New York, was the first MLS team to sign an esports player to their roster. So he will train. They will build content around him. They will tell stories, and he will represent the club in a range of different tournaments around the world. So it's a really, really fascinating space, and we see it as a huge opportunity to get more people to the threshold. So it's great.
Yeah, I'll go down the other way here. Let's start with John. David mentioned the word, and that's the word we all look at, brand, these days. So SI is the brand, the legacy brand. Sports Illustrated, we all grew up waiting for that to come to our mailbox, and it maintains that credibility, that sort of high credible brand. But now we see everyone looking, where's the next? And you've gone into, whether it's extreme sports or whether it's extra mustard or all these little side areas of Sports Illustrated. Is it to look for the next? Is it to see what's the next space beyond the legacy brand of Sports Illustrated?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of a classic business school conundrum for any brand. I mean,
right.
How do you retain your identity and your authenticity and then also find new opportunity? And it's an ongoing challenge. I think at some level you need to stay true to your core competencies. It's something that's really, I think Barstool does a terrific job at what they do, and I think there's real built-in advantage to having a brand that's a lot more recent. That I always describe it as the bar mitzvah singer that suddenly starts doing hip hop. I mean, at some level, Sports Illustrated said, you know what, enough with the Stanley Cup. We're going to do esports. I think it wouldn't come across as authentic. At the same time, we don't want to just do what we've always been doing. And I think that at some level, sports are sports, but at another level, this space has really evolved and will continue really evolving. This is it's a constant challenge to balance. How do you stay with your core principles, your storytelling? How do you not dilute the brand, but at the same time not stay where you are?
Same thought, Eric?
Yeah, I think look, we're a brand that's been around for almost 4 decades now, and the amount of innovation that goes on at ESPN, you're constantly still fighting what the legacy possibility of being thought of as a cable network, when internally at the company, that could be no further from the truth that we even think that way. So I think, you know, for us, we create other types of innovation, but tend to, for our standpoint, stick with ESPN as kind of the core brand itself. And thinking about that here in the US versus internationally, we've had some great opportunities down in Latin America to be able to create kind of a more insurgent brand of what ESPN's thought about and put product in there that makes it feel like different than what the US version is. I think over time, you'll see us, you know, continuing to try to expand what fandom looks like, right? Ultimately, we want to be experts or proficient at live connection with fandom, whatever fandom is. And I think you'll see our brand kind of expand as a result of that.
And even the brand on ESPN, you just noticed the changes, the more embraced debate formats. Is that responding to what consumers want, consumer landscape?
Think about the most important sub-brand we have, which is SportsCenter, right? And what SportsCenter is had to be redefined because of how people consume highlights. And we've gone very personality-oriented, as you guys have noticed. Scott Van Pelt in 11P or 12 at late night, and you have Michael and Jamel at 6. And the personalities are to help expand what you come in to, like, listen to what people are thinking. I want to hear what Michael and Jamel have to say about this issue versus I need to see the highlight of what that was.
Erika, you, in your first answer, in the first 7 words I counted, you used disruption twice. So you're all about disruption. Is that fair?
I think we are the next, like, to the question. I think Barstool is an exceptionally formidable brand, and mostly because the subject that we cover, we don't treat it as sacred. And I think it's hard when you have a very established brand, when you are dealing with the leagues. You have major, I mean, the size of Time and ESPN compared to a Barstool, and the pressures and the commitments and the contracts that you have versus that we do not have puts you in a really different spot in terms of how you cover things, where you cover things, why you cover things. I'm very bullish about Barstool, and I'm bullish about Barstool because Stoolies, our audience, is very much a part of our brand. And when you talk about fans, we are a fan brand. We cover every single topic that we cover as fans of that topic. And there's no difference between us, how our guys feel about something and how Stoolies or our audience feels about something. We talk to them all day long on Twitter. We are amorphous in that way, and I believe that all future brands will be socially distributed experiences, will be brands that travel through social, and I would argue there's no company better at that than us.
Is it your goal to have relationships with leagues, or to completely stay away from that?
No, sure, we're very open. I joined Barstool 9 months ago. I was probably the second person there that wasn't a blogger. We had 15 people. We now have almost 70 people. We are a very young company. It is a brand that's very established, but we are a very young company. And part of growing is starting to work with established players. I mean, when I got to Barstool, Barstool had never met with Twitter. They had never met with Facebook. They didn't meet with reporters. They didn't meet with people like ESPN or others. And this week we broke 2 pieces of news and were credited for that on ESPN. So that in and of itself is radical for Barstool. So yes, we'll start to work with all different types of players. You'll never see us cover something in an X's and O's capacity. I don't think you will ever see us be the straight guy on something, but you will see us work with a lot of different people.
So I think that answer kind of leads me into at least the question which we're focused on today, as it says on the screen, the evolving landscape of consumer demand. So as we look forward, and I kind of look at each of these brands as you were talking, primary, delivery, podcast, cable, print. Understand you're all diversified now, and you're all much more than that. Live entertainment with MLS. It's like, how do you think about? Again, Erika touched on it a bit in terms of the podcast philosophy. How do each of you think about how you're going to deliver your content going forward to the millennials in particular? And I know the term millennials gets beat up and probably overused, but how do fans of the future, how do they get their fix on sports? Eric?
Me?
Sure.
You have to think about publishing content under your brand wherever it is that they want to consume, right? They want to be in control and curate in their own way, in a way that, quite frankly, my generation wouldn't have wanted. And personalization is key as well. So for us, and for our company's management team, it's been about making sure that ESPN existed across every single platform, so that ESPN was a platform in and of itself. So if that's Snapchat, if that's Roku, if that's Apple TV, if that's YouTube, wherever it is that fans want to consume sport, we're publishing ESPN content there. And, like with Snapchat, publishing it in a way that fits the environment as opposed to the way it would fit the environment on ESPN. Right, so if you guys check out the Discover stories, they're very different in terms of how they're published by design. And I think for us, it's figuring out how to do that, how to adapt to their consumption model, because their consumption model is less time spent, more frequency over the course of a day. Right? They're just spending less time on an individual basis, but they're spending more number of times that they're coming to consume within a day. And so how do we think about that as a way to, one, publish content, and two, create revenue opportunities from that?
Yeah, I would say you're stealing my answer. I think that's exactly right. I mean, you go where the audience is, but I think for too long, a lot of media brands were more concerned about the where than the how, and I think how you're presenting the content is every bit as important as the where. The data helps figure that out. I mean, the other thing, something that I find invigorating, it's a frustration at some level, but I think it's really invigorating, is that every now and then there are curveballs. I'm sure you guys have the same thing, that in a lot of cases, attention spans are getting shorter. In some cases, they're not. There's some stories where these millennials that we all think can barely sit through a 22-second video are spending 7 minutes diving into a story. It's a constant...
Listening to Erika's podcast.
Yeah, exactly.
What's the average length of your podcast?
I mean, if you listen to a Pat McAfee podcast, it'll be half a day. So
yeah, right. How long is the Joe Rogan? Yeah, right. How long is Pat McAfee?
I mean, Pat McAfee can go on forever. So it's like 2 hours and his first podcast was 2 hours and 47 minutes. We were like, hey, Pat, maybe we could get this down to like an hour.
Dial it down.
But it's true, though, if you have an engaging brand and you have affinity between the personality on that brand and its audience, like we published something, we created a series called Stool Scenes, which is basically a reality show of Barstool Sports. We publish it.
Goes along with our first panelist, right? Peter King, defined turd.
Yeah, exactly.
Sorry.
Exactly, there's a lot of turds in there. So we drop it on Friday nights. When we finish it, could be at 10:30 p.m., could be at 2 in the morning. A kid who calls himself Young Page Views publishes it. It's on average 47 minutes long. We have a 75% completion rate. Last weekend we had 220 million minutes viewed. And that is long form content from Barstool Sports, which is published at a time when no one knows it's coming out. And if you listen to the rules, is the worst possible time to publish something. So I think when you have an audience and you have a personality that someone feels a connection to, anything is possible.
Ultimately, brand is still a navigator
100%.
In this world. Regardless of how complicated the consumption world has become, brand is always navigator.
Mm-hmm.
David?
Yeah, so I think in terms of what the guys have said, totally agree. We go where the fans are. We're constantly evaluating new channels and new ways to reach these consumers. A lot of that, in terms of what we do, is really customizing and building bespoke content, promo messages, for these particular audiences. We know millennials can drop off. We know we have to serve them the right type of stuff. The way that we like to look at it is we're always kind of constantly in a state of beta. So the world we live in is constantly changing. It's constantly evolving. The information that we have at our fingertips is always there in real time, and we're learning stuff constantly. So for us, it's a case of how can we tweak, how can we adapt, how can we put something in front of someone that we know is going to land in a much more impactful way. So a really good example of that is in December around MLS Cup, we were promoting the final, which was Toronto and Seattle. And we decided to push the message, and most of our media buy is around the social channels, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Snapchat. We've just started to kind of buy on Snapchat as well as put content through Snapchat. What we did is we created a unique piece of creative for all those channels, and we optimized in real time. So with the help of an agency, we put these out into the wild, and we were constantly evaluating what was happening. So we were able to see where the drop-off rates were. So if we were seeing a quick drop-off rate on a 15-second or a 20-second promo message for the league, for example, we would pull it back in-house. We would look at the moment that the consumer dropped off. We would change the clip. So maybe we put a goal in there or a great fan image or something else, and we'd put it back out. So we would constantly optimize the message so that we were able to achieve the success that we wanted to get out of that. That was a really interesting test for us because, you know, a lot of this is talking about attention span. And I think with the tools we have around us, we're able to measure that in a really smart way. And I think every brand that is successful in the modern world has to react, has to adapt. It has to stand for something ultimately, as Eric said. It's the most important thing, but when you filter that into how you activate and how you execute, you have to be mindful of how the consumer is reacting to your particular offer and don't feel like you can't change. And that was a really interesting lesson for us, and it resulted in the #1 viewed game in MLS history, and a lot of that was to do with this optimization of the message.
Can I ask a question?
Of course.
Can you talk about the MLS brand and the evolution of where it is on the journey because of the, you know, of what it was and how it's become, and it's become very in vogue. We talked a little backstage. I think it's very interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. So the MLS, for all you guys in the room, 22 years in, we were about 11, 12 years ago, we were only 10 teams. We're now 22, soon to be 23 next year with LAFC. We have soccer-specific stadiums all across the country, downtown, urban core. Our target audience is millennials, which I think every brand out there today is wanting to excite and get millennials on board. The difference that we look at it around our brand is these consumers are not just consuming our sport, they are our brand, they are our experience. So when we think about the MLS brand, it's not just the product on the field, because if we compete just with the product on the field and we position our brand just to talk about what's going on in the white lines, we're not necessarily going to win, because there's great soccer leagues all over the world, and they're all here in America, they're all playing in America, they all have live games in America, you know, content tailored to the region. What they don't have is this soccer culture that sits around it, which involves these amazing stadiums, these amazing fan groups, this noise, this energy, this thing that's going on in the stadium that actually is our brand. So when we think about what makes MLS different in this marketplace, which is, by the way, as you know, incredibly competitive, we have horizontal and vertical competition. We have horizontal competition from all of the other sports leagues, all the traditional sports leagues. We have vertical competition from all of the soccer leagues, as I mentioned. So we have to be really, really smart about understanding what our consumer wants and what's going on in the competitive set. And I think we've been able to position our brand around the overall experience and create an invitation in for a millennial consumer, which really, as I mentioned, is our core. Millennials want brands that listen to them. Millennials don't want the old school kind of relationship where it's kind of teacher-student. I'll message some stuff down to you, the old ad model, right, if you like. I'll message some stuff down. Some of that will resonate with you depending on the type of person you are, and you'll go out and you'll demonstrate behaviors based on what you just heard. We wanted to flip that model and just sit down with people and go, what do you want? This is yours as much as it is ours. Come and join the movement, take part, shape it. If you go to an MLS game, it's 2 halves of 45 minutes. There is no corporate message telling you how loud to chant. The fans create the atmosphere. The fans create the energy. It's very authentic. It's very from the ground up. It's very much driven by millennials. They are singing the songs for 90 minutes. No one's prompting them at all. They are erecting ginormous tifos and banners. Now, tifos are giant flags with a message on. It could be anything. Check out tifos in MLS. There's a ton of websites that celebrate them. They're the most amazing expression of fandom and creativity that I think is out there. It's because we are giving the millennial or the fan in MLS an opportunity to feel like this is their league, to shape, to grow, to create around. And I think that's a very, very different offer. And we have to be consistent with that because of just how competitive the world is. And if we go after that in the right way and we're able to activate that locally, and our local clubs can build their own rituals around their club, I think we'll be incredibly successful. So the brand is the most important thing for us. It's a living, breathing thing, and we have to be smart about how we manage it. But that's how we kind of position ourselves in the world, if you like.
Just to piggyback on that, I think that's a great point. I think this is a point that I think sometimes it's so obvious, and yet it doesn't necessarily get explicitly made, which is the experience of being a fan, the fan's relationship with sports and athletes and teams has radically changed in the last few years. And we talk about disruption in media, and we talk about sort of these day-to-day issues and teams going to Las Vegas and stadium issues. But I think a core issue that sometimes gets overlooked is that a fan's expectation, a fan's not just level of engagement, but mode of engagement, time of engagement, the way you made the teacher-student analogy, but I think it even goes further than that. I think the way fans are consuming sports, not just on their phones versus on their televisions, but just emotionally as a philosophical, I think that's really undergone radical changes in the last few years that I think feeds into this whole discussion, but I think sometimes gets overlooked.
Totally, I totally agree with that. Now, if you think about, I think there's a couple of great examples in our league where we do invite fans in and give them a different type of relationship, because we can't be building brands just around winning, because you can only have one winner a year. It has to be about something much deeper. And we think by bringing fans under the hood and letting them feel like it is their movement to grow, we think we can create a different type of offer, which is, we think, the right type of offer for a modern and progressive sports league. So you've got to look at someone like Seattle Sounders. The fans vote on the general manager. They vote on who they want the general manager to be. That's the ultimate fan involvement in a professional sports club or franchise. And it'll go all the way down to, you know, what type of food do you want to see in the stadium? What type of jersey do you want the team to wear? So the fan is invested in a totally different way, and I think that kind of gets to the point that you just raised.
No, and I think John made a great point earlier that when we talk about millennials, and I think people don't like hearing talked about millennials who are millennials, because it's like, whoa, they have cooties or whatever they have. But they will engage. So we talk about short attention spans and it's all on the phone. They will engage. They'll engage in podcasts. They'll engage in long form reading. They'll engage in the embrace debate. You know, they'll sit and watch. This is interesting. So what I think we're talking about here is we've got to create curated content that you look at and you go, wow, I can engage in that. And it's not a question of, I only have 30 seconds. If you make it good, they'll stay. So I think sometimes we overrate this kind of, they'll only read a blog, they'll only watch for 30 seconds, they'll only read something that's quick and pictures. I think we underestimate that.
Yeah, I think for millennials, you're not going to get a millennial today that's probably going to watch a 3-hour Major League Baseball game in one sitting, but they might consume 3 hours worth of Major League Baseball across lots of platforms. It's just going to look different. It doesn't mean that the interest isn't there, the engagement isn't there. It just means that it's going to look very different, and it's going to be across all of our brands, quite frankly, in terms of how they're consuming that.
Which is great, right?
And you know, we talked about Noah backstage. I mean, like, that's an example of consuming Major League Baseball content in the day.
Yeah, I think that the big thing is, at Barstool, we think about what's funny. Like, what we care about is that it's funny and that people like it. And we have 22 guys who make collectively 150 pieces of content every day just trying to be funny. They fight with each other for airspace. We could do a better job curating it. We can use math to be more distributed. But at the end of the day, it's about affinity. There is an affinity. There is also, I think the other big thing that people miss is that one of our biggest advantages is we're from the internet. So we understand, it's not millennial, it's internet behavior. So having a conversation at the same time as you're watching a piece of content is, for us, a no-brainer. Has to happen. We had kids, opening day was Monday. We had kids in school. We got tweets, probably 200 tweets on Monday of kids watching a game on an iPad, on Twitter on their phones, in class. And that's a unique second screen experience. But we see it, there's conversation around every blog we publish, there's conversation around every episode of a podcast that someone downloads. And I also think there's a second screen experience happening with all major sporting events, right? It's you're watching the game and then you're having a conversation about it. And so for me, it's, when you think about reaching elusive demographics, all I care about is the phone. Like, I don't think about any other piece of distribution that is not on a phone. I'm obsessed with the phone. And the reason is because the conversation and the content, it's the only place where they happen simultaneously. And for us, that's where I think we'll be very aggressive, and you'll see us chip away at things we've never had.
Yeah, for us, it's the non-linear. Right? Linear matters incredibly so, but we developed something called ESPN On Scene this year, where we realized that for every football event we go to, college or Monday Night Football, we have like 400 staffers who are there, cameramen, people who are PAs, coordinating producers, reporters, staff of all kinds, and we realized we have all these people there and then we're not giving them access to published content. So we created some software we call Shortstop, that allows and enabled an app so that now all 400 of them with their iPhones or their Samsung devices can now take clips from the site and create content that we can then curate and push out to every social channel within 12 seconds from that. And that's the way of thinking for us that's going holistically outside of what you would think of as ESPN and being obsessed with the phone in that way. And from that, we've seen that was when Russell and Kevin Durant walked by each other at the NBA All-Star game. That was an example of, that was a coordinating producer who just happened to have a phone, who happened to be standing there at the time, and took that. We ripped it off.
I think the other big thing that we haven't talked about, though, is monetization. And I think that people, I think it's very hard for the ESPNs and the SIs and NBCs or CBS, the major networks of the world that are ad-supported. So I don't think there's enough conversation around the business model, because the business model is what chokes change. When you look at how many seasons American Idol was on, American Idol has gone on forever. And the reason is it commands so many ad dollars, it delivers enough eyeballs that it perpetuates itself because the network doesn't have a replacement show. And so to me, the thing that also has to change with content is how you make it commercial. So for Barstool, our merch business is my single biggest focus from a monetization standpoint. It's not ads. It's how do I get people to love the Barstool brand? Someone's here with a flag. I love that. How do I get people to want to wear the Barstool brand, show the Barstool brand? And that enables me, one, to be very free in what we talk about. And two, it enables us to have a business model that can exist on a phone where you're not commanding the CPM rates and you're not driving the reach or GRP numbers. So I also think that's a big piece that's not spoken, but is a massive part of change.
I enjoy our mobile revenues quite well.
I bet you do.
No, I think it's funny. I mean, I saw even on the list on the program, and I said, these are 4 people that are in the same space and that are all sports fans and are all sort of forward-thinking. At the same time, these are four very different business models.
Yeah.
I'm sort of with you. I would not be so cavalier about our advertisers, but I see your point as well, and I think we all four are, we're in the grand continuum very closely bunched, but I think all four of us are probably coming at this from very different perspectives.
And Eric and I were talking about it before we came on stage as well. Soccer's a very unique game because it's 2 halves of 45 minutes and there's no ad breaks. You know, the other sports have all of these moments where you can cut over to kind of partner messaging. So we have to be really smart about how we grow our audiences around the different platforms that we create, the different moments in our season, as well as the content series that we build that allows us to tell the stories, because they're the things that we want to ultimately sell to partners. But it's not as easy to monetize, or it's a different model of monetization, I guess, than a lot of the other North American sports have.
But I think the big sports are taking a lesson from MLS and from soccer, where Roger Goodell's talking this week about we've got to bring down the game time and bring down the ad time from now you're trying to get below 3 hours. I think in 10 years he's going to be trying to get below 2 hours, 2.5 hours, just because, and this is where I'll go the other way on millennials, we're busy, right? We're busy. We don't have time to watch all these ads before you get back to game action. So I think that's going to be a disruption down the road.
I think Erika one of you raised a good point too, that you may not sit for a 3-hour game. I know personally, I mean, I'm just as big a sports fan as I used to be, and yet actual game consumption has probably never been lower. If those games shrink, that doesn't mean you're diminishing the engagement of the fan.
Right.
It's just taking it to a different place.
And one thing, audience engagement, about the power of sports. How many out here, show of hands, will binge watch a program, a series? Everyone. How many will binge watch past sporting events? Well, there's always a couple stragglers. But it's the power of live sports. I mean, we talk about millennials not even having TVs. The reason they have TVs is for sports. It's the live TV you have to watch.
It's really interesting. So 96% of our content is consumed live. Everything that ESPN has is perishable because there's always something next. So the dramatic difference of that versus entertainment media consumption in the video environment is radically different, and that's helped with the concept of how advertising fits within live sport. It's just different. So the rest of the marketplace is going to time-shifted advertising model, and ESPN's been very focused on just live. We're only live, that's all we are. But if you look at what we're measuring from a live streaming standpoint, so no longer a set-top box, now this is over the top, this is a mobile phone, this is Chromecast, this is any of those devices, we're now seeing 18 to 34-year-olds a 9% lift in live streaming alone. And on top of that, we're also now measuring out-of-home. And out-of-home, everybody thinks is bars and restaurants. Actually, 30% of out-of-home consumption is actually in someone else's home. Because that's kind of what's happening. So sports is a gathering place. And in some instances, if people don't have cable in their home, they're going to someone else's home to watch the big events. So we're seeing this, and we're seeing from that, anywhere between 6% to, in college basketball, it's 18% lifts of people who are watching, consuming sports out of the home. Gyms, bars and restaurants, other people's homes, hotels, etc. So we're seeing just a lot of different types of consumption than we've seen in the past.
We talked a little about the average age of sports fans, and I saw some numbers recently that suggested the average age of an NBA fan today is 37 years old. Average age of a NFL fan is in the mid-40s. The average age of an MLB fan is 57 years old. So, and by the way, when I mentioned those numbers to David Bruce, he said, and the average age of an MLS fan is 29, correct? So
That's
what
correct.
is, I understand that maybe David will have a slightly different point of view on this, but what does that say about where you're going to push? In other words, is it a sports-specific audience that you care about? I mean, Eric, you're the ones writing checks, big checks for rights fees. Not yet. You're raising the money to write big checks for rights.
Yeah, more that way.
Yes, and but where do you push as a business model going forward? And how do you take those aging demographics and bake them into a sports model? I mean, Erika, I understand that at some level, you're a media company. It doesn't really matter. John, you might have the same perspective, but I'm just curious to know, like, how do those those are striking numbers to me. I assume maybe to some in the audience as well. It's like, how does it relate to each of your businesses? John?
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's probably reactive. I mean, it's probably sort of, hey, Major League Baseball's got to figure that out, and meanwhile, armed with that data, that's going to impact baseball coverage vis-a-vis NBA coverage. I mean, I'm not sure it's the media's job to address those so much as react to them.
Got it. I think that's right. It's a business model issue.
Yeah, I think, first of all, David said that kids playing FIFA, which made me feel really good because I'm 48 and I play a lot of FIFA, so that makes me feel very young. So I'm going to start with aging myself down with that moment. Secondly, what we're noticing is that even for the Major League Baseball fan, every device has a different median age, and the spectrum is about 20 to 25 years. So it's a little bit less about the league sometimes, and it's a little bit more about the platform and the ability to deliver through the platform the same interest and consumption that exists. It's just consumed differently.
Erika?
We have a very large age span for Barstool. So guys 14 to 49 we serve a lot of audiences. One, because we cover what's topical. Two is because we are a tribe in our own right and have a language and a narrative. I agree with Eric entirely. I think it's more a function of the consumption by medium.
Or by angle sometimes, right?
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree. From my standpoint, we want to grow that sweet demographic that I think everyone else here wants to grow as well. But what we're really interested in, again, my earlier point, is just engagement. So for me, if a 50-year-old, we have a daily newsletter. And we like to joke that we invented the newsletter, and Kay Marco is the blogger that does it. And moms love the newsletter. I mean, we have a lot of moms of guys your age reading the newsletter. And I'm happy to have the moms reading the newsletter. So for us, it's more about just finding people who have affinity to our voice and continuing to nurture and grow that, and understand that, like a sport, this is selfish from a Barstool standpoint, but the followers of Barstool on Instagram versus our followers on Facebook versus the people that come to the blog versus people that listen to the various pods are different audiences, and we program to them very differently. And we don't share the inside Barstool stuff on Instagram. That's just what half the people on our Instagram just think we're funny on Instagram. They don't know the whole story beyond that. So I think about it more as a function of audience and platform.
And David, you've got the inside lane on the demographics. So is your challenge the same as the others, or is yours getting fans into the stadiums around the country, as opposed to worrying about how you're going to deliver the content more globally or outside the stadium?
Yeah, it's. I think we're sitting in a really good position as it relates to just overall. The number of the average age of our fan is clearly younger than the other leagues, and we do a really good job of getting people in our stadium. But we're only 22-year-old as well, so we've got to be mindful of that as these fans get older. How we fill in the pipeline underneath. There's clearly a lot of upward movement around the game of soccer. It's the highest participated sport across the country. So you would look at the pipeline, you think, okay, there's a lot coming up, but our stadiums are kind of capped at a number. For those guys in the audience, by the way, we're the 6th most watched global soccer league in the stadium. So Our newest team, Atlanta, have sold out both their first 2 games, 55,000. And what's really interesting about our league is the crossover with some of the other sports. So Atlanta and Seattle, who both share facilities with the NFL team, the crossover with season ticket holders is between 3 and 5%. So it's a totally different audience. We've got to continue to serve our brand in relevant ways to that audience to keep them coming back for more. So the challenge for us probably isn't in the stadium, it's the scale that we need on TV. So that's the nut that we're trying to crack, and those numbers are creeping up. But I think that's where we need to get to. And it's interesting to think about, because when you have a millennial base, they're cable cutters. I don't have cable in the house. I'm a cable cutter. So if you think about that, and you think about how Nielsen's the company that measures ratings, how are we going to get around that? And there has to be a way of scoring total engagement and total viewership around live TV. So I don't know if you guys read a few weeks ago, but we started a Facebook Live stream through Univision. All of our Univision and Unimas games, which are broadcast in Spanish, will be broadcast in English on Facebook Live. And it's being broadcast in a totally different way than the traditional linear broadcast. Different type of announcers, more conversational, more young. They're feeding off the comments in real time, so they will bring in the live comments that people are inputting into Facebook, and they'll feed that into the commentary around the live experience. So we're testing that at the moment, and it's well, like 3 weeks in, and it's really, really fascinating. But that's the challenge as it relates to kind of our business.
Well, time flies once again. I think we turn into a pumpkin at 1, and we're after that. So Erika, Eric, John, David, thanks so much. Thanks to this panel.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Is Amelia here? Amelia, final comments. Putting on this journal is the Moorad Sports Law Journal. Our executive editor is Amelia Corrado with some final comments for the symposium.
Hang on, almost done.
Oh, no, that's fine. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Amelia Corrado. I'm the editor-in-chief of the Jeffrey S. Moorad Sports Law Journal. I'd like to thank all of our panelists for these incredible discussions that we've had today. And also, I would like to thank Jeff Moorad for providing this forum for us. Hashtag Moorad was trending on Twitter today, so that's pretty incredible and apropos given our discussion today. But this is just truly an invaluable experience, not only for the professionals, but for the students as well. So thank you very much. And Andrew Brandt, we would not be here without you. I know you've been thinking about the symposium pretty much every day for the past 9 or 10 months. So thank you for your dedication in making this all happen. There were also a lot of students that were involved in this. I'd like to thank the editors and staff writers of the Jeffrey S. Moorad Sports Law Journal, particularly Devin Stauffer, Alan Conklin, and Tommy Sinclair. I'd like to thank all of the student fellows for the Moorad Center, and any other student that was involved somehow in all of the ideas that we've had today. So thank you all very much. We've also had an incredible amount of support from the law school, so I'd like to thank Dean Alexander, Nicole Garofano, Brian Sirak, everybody at UNIT, Patty Trask, Kate, Julie, Sam, everybody in the communications department, and everyone I forgot. So thank you all so much for making us feel so welcome here. Transcripts from today's symposium will be available in the next issue of the Jeffrey S. Moorad Sports Law Journal, which should be out in the next month or two. So visit the law school website if you are interested in that. And for those of you that are participating in the 4th annual Game Day Case Competition tomorrow, put on by the Moorad Center, welcome, and we hope you enjoy. So we appreciate that you've all been here, and thank you so much. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you.
Absolutely. It was nice to meet you.